All right. Well, we are here for another God Thoughts conversation, and I want to thank Lisa Skopil for joining me today. Thank you, Lisa, for being up for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
So we are going to start off, I think, by just introducing you to the community for anybody who doesn't know you, and thought maybe you could start off by talking about what your life is like, or what kind of normal life was like, and maybe what transitions you've had to kind of navigate over this last month or so.
Well, we're in an interesting season, my husband and I, because he retired just about a year and a half ago. And so I'd already been in a season for about 4 or 5 years where life had slowed down quite a bit. And then he joined me. And so for us, this is a little bit normal for us, and honestly, and I tend to be, I have not worked outside of the home for quite a while. I have two adult children. One lives in Portland and one lives in Eugene, and my husband and I. And so we have lived kind of a quieter life for a while. And the last, I would say, year or so, my time is a lot of time invested in spending time with people. I became a spiritual director about a year ago. And a spiritual director is kind of like a spiritual life coach. I spend time with people, and it is asking questions to help them know what's going on interiorly and where God is in the midst of their life. And sometimes we lose track of that, of where is God. And so as a spiritual director, I get the privilege of being kind of another set of ears and eyes for people to understand or see things that maybe they might not see about God, or the relationship with God, or what's going on inside. So my time previous to this, but my time now as well, has been a lot of time with people. And before, it was one-on-ones or small groups, spending time, together. And now it's lots of time on the phone. I think it's driving my husband a little crazy because I'm on the phone all the time, and quite a few Zoom meetings and FaceTime meetings. So that's kind of where life has been. And now we're just settling into this kind of new normal. And we kind of all know we don't know what the new normal is yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is probably one of the big challenges that people are facing, is how do we navigate the unknowns when a lot of life kind of we have created a known structure or rhythm for ourselves. A lot of those have been upended, and that comes with a lot of what we call just emotional turmoil. It just comes with a lot of new feelings, questions, and stuff that gets surfaced that maybe was just hanging out in the background before. I'm curious, would you be up for sharing just what this transition has been like for you so far?
Yeah. I think I have to be honest, those first 2 to 3 weeks, and it's been about almost a month now since I went into my isolation. We got back from a trip a couple of days before everything started shutting down. And then I had to go to the doctor because I had this cough, and I thought, uh-oh. And they said, we don't think you have the virus, but stay home anyhow. And so this is starting, I'm middle of week 4 now. All that to say is those first 2 to 3 weeks were an emotional roller coaster. I had days where I didn't really want to get out of bed, or I'd stay in my bathrobe until 3 p.m. I take naps, but I couldn't sleep. I would feel, there were times, I think you and I've talked about this, times when I literally could feel just the emotions just turning in on my body, and I just would feel not just sick to my stomach, but sick. I just would feel awful. And so weathering through those early weeks was hard. And I would talk to a lot of people, and some people were like, oh, I'm doing fine. And I was like, man, what's wrong with me? I wake up feeling sick to my stomach. I wake up with some anxiety that is kind of, I have called it cycling around in the periphery. I just feel it. It may not be dominating my thoughts, but it's there. So probably about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I reached a point, and I think I was also going through some shame, a little bit of that inner shame of like, gosh, I'm a Christian. I should be full of faith. Why can't I achieve this place of peace and faith and trust that other people seem to be, you know, have arrived at? Um, and I think finally I reached this place one day where I was listening to some beautiful music and sitting in my quiet space, and I could just feel the emotions start to come to the surface, and I allowed them to. I think I'd been holding them at bay. I didn't want to admit that I was scared. I didn't want to admit that I was angry or uh, grieving. And I just sat and allowed everything to come to the surface. And I can't tell you how cleansing that was for me. It was just this moment with God of just sitting there and going, this is where I really am. I'm scared. What's life going to look like? Life has totally changed. It's unfamiliar. I was grieving for the world, grieving, and I still do. I mean, that grieving for our nation, grieving for parents who, like yourself, who have kids at home. All of a sudden, you're trying to juggle the responsibilities of working full time and having children that are home all the time. Grieving for a medical profession or medical community, for people who have gone through the illness, who have died, um, people who've lost their jobs. I mean, all of that. It was just this huge thing. And I just finally let it come out. And I'm not going to say that was a turning point for me, but it was almost a relief to just say, yeah, this is how I feel, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think in the midst of that too, I just felt like God was with me saying, it's okay. You're human. I understand your humanity, and it's okay to feel what you're feeling. And that was a relief too.
Yeah, it's such a strange thing to have this, what I've heard it called, like this kind of silent menace, this threat of what could be, but you don't know. And
Yeah.
at the same time, I think about my life, maybe you think about your life this way. It's like, I'm not going through major hardships myself. Why am I feeling so weird? I had an
Yeah.
experience where I was listening to a podcast that was just telling some stories from what other people were going through. And as I'm listening, I'm feeling these tears, behind my eyes, and realizing all those emotions are there because you're aware that these things are happening. You're aware that people are being affected in all sorts of ways. But it was so hard to experience those things because I couldn't put my finger on it in my life. Like, what is causing me this pain? I didn't have a specific thing. And there was something about, like you were saying, allowing those feelings to sort of happen, that is a cleansing thing. And I like to think of it, someone once gave me an image of like a log jam. Like, you should have this debris kind of flowing through your emotional life and getting cleaned out as you go. And sometimes it just kind of gets backed up, in a sense, like it just gets like jammed up, and you need something to sort of let it go, and there is a sense of relief. What was the process, sort of, so where do you go once you have those moments of relief? Because I think a lot of us, it's like those moments of relief seem like maybe few and far between, and it's hard to know, like, what do I do? Okay, now that has happened, now what has the process been like for you since that moment?
um, I've been gentler on myself,
Hmm.
and I've recognized there are going to be days, and we all are going to have them. There are going to be days when I feel okay, and I feel like I can do this. And there are going to be other days when those emotions are there. And I feel like I'm giving myself grace to be able to to be with wherever I am today. So that's been an improvement, um, or at least helpful, just to recognize that I don't have to be a certain way. We're navigating through uncharted territory. In fact, I wanted to share with you something that I was thinking about recently. Was talking to a friend, and she used this wonderful, we've all heard this, the concept of construction, deconstruction, reconstruction. But this was from a man, I think his name is Walter Brueggemann, who's written a lot about the Psalms. And he talks about orientation disorientation and reorientation. And that really struck with me. And then I want to just explain just briefly, because I think it fits really well with what we're in the process. Our world is going through the process of. So orientation is that place where we're just feeling like, life is normal. It's probably where we were pre-coronavirus, in general, not for all of us, but for most of us, where life is predictable. We've got a rhythm and routine down. We're living our lives. We kind of know it's predictable, kind of know what to expect. And then we hit, whether it's through grief or loss, death, illness, could be through divorce or change in finances or change in job, we hit that disorientation place. And that is, we feel like we've been kind of thrown into a pit that we're not going to be able to crawl out of. It's really unsettling. It's scary. We don't know what to expect. We don't know when it's going to end. It's unfamiliar territory. And we all find ourselves there at some point or another. And then the third thing is reorientation. And reorientation, meaning we come out of that disorientation into a place where we recognize that God has brought us into a new place. It's a welcome place, and we feel more comfortable and more, we just kind of a place of acceptance, let's put it that way. And I loved the concept of disorientation because that's where we are. And so you asked me, what my process has been. I think one of the things that I'm learning to embrace is this biblical concept of lament, which that sounds like such a biblical word. I mean, who uses that word normally? So when I say that word, I just want to ask you, what do you think of if you just heard the word lament, what would your thought be about that? Because I think we all kind of have an image in our mind of lamentation or lament.
Yeah, I honestly, the picture that comes to my mind is like, in cultures where there's like loud and weeping, like at a funeral or whatever, or a season of time where someone is saying like, I'm grieving this very specific thing, and I'm doing it in this very obvious way, like it's this kind of like a over the top, sort of expression
Wailing.
of emotion.
Yeah. And I think we have that idea that with lament, that it is all about sorrow and grief, which it absolutely can be. But as I kind of have looked more into this, lament is, the concept biblically is really bringing our emotions to God. And oftentimes they're in the form of a complaint. As you look at like the Psalms, I learned that there are 30%, over 30% of the Psalms are laments. I think that's right. And so you look at King David and how, we've kind of read some of those one where he's like, how long is this going to last? Where are you, God? I'm really, when are you going to come back to me? How long must I wait for you to respond? I'm in a terrible place. Those are the beginnings of a lot of those Psalms of lament. And I think that, they're a place of sorrow, but oftentimes they're just coming out and saying, this is where I am, and I'm really struggling. So this concept of lament was kind of what I experienced that day that I just shared about when I allowed the emotions to come up. It was acknowledging this is how I feel, and with God present, and allowing him to sit in my grief or my fear or my anger with me. Yeah. And I think that lament, the concept is so simple. I mean, we can do this journaling. Some people love to journal, and we can write our own just simple lament of coming to God. We all have those feelings right now. It's like, life is different. I don't like this. This is scary. What do I do? What's life going to look like on the other side? Yeah. So to bring those either through form of journaling, and you bring your complaint. Actually, there are 3 steps to lament. There's the complaint, there is a request, and then there's a place of trust. So it's acknowledging those difficult places, first of all. And man, I tell you, I dump them out.
Mhm.
Everything that I can bring out.
Yeah, yeah, that makes me think though. I'm thinking of the kind of my life and the process I've gone through, and thinking of others that I've spoken with. One of the challenges that we face with that is that we so often view those emotions, which are unpleasant emotions, as though they're inherently bad or wrong,
Yeah,
and
we
that we
do.
shouldn't feel them, right? And so when you talk about being in that space with God, I can imagine and I can know what I would have felt before I had kind of gone through some of that journey, which was, for one, I don't feel comfortable feeling that way. And two, I don't even know how I would invite God into that space, partly because I would imagine that maybe God wouldn't be happy that I was feeling that way or that I should fix it, right? So
I
when
so
you
agree.
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, a couple years ago, I really was studying during Lent, Jesus's journey to the cross. And one of the things that really hit me was he lamented. And that whole picture of him in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he asks his three disciples to come with him, and then he goes and he weeps. And he is, I mean, to the point where he is, they say, the sweating blood.
Mhm.
That is a place of crying out. And he did not hold back those emotions. And we don't know exactly what he was experiencing. And we don't know, if he was wailing or, who knows. But I loved that example that Jesus, as a human being, allowed himself to feel those deep emotions. And I'm sure there were some emotions of pain.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure there was the emotions of feeling like all of my friends, one of my closest friends actually, has turned me in. All of my friends are going to abandon me. And can I really do this? Can I really go through this suffering?
Yeah.
And so to look at him and go, he sets the example.
Yeah.
I loved that. And it gave me permission to feel those things that I was feeling. Like, you're right. We grow up I think in a Christian culture that oftentimes it's like, you shouldn't be afraid, deal with that right away. You shouldn't be angry. Don't let people see that you're sad. We don't allow ourselves to cry. Oftentimes in funerals, we apologize. I'm sorry, wiping our eyes because we don't want people to see. But those are part of the human condition. And God made us that way. And I love that, gives me permission to feel what I feel.
That's such a foundational and yet easy thing to overlook. If you believe that God made us, and I believe that He did, then the emotions were part of the package, all of them. And if you look at Jesus, as you're saying, Jesus experiences the full depth and range of human emotion, and yet that didn't disrupt his connection with God, with the Father. Instead, he's experiencing it all with the Father. What an amazing picture for us to journey into. And recently, I was led in an exercise that was paying attention to what I was feeling
Mhm.
and trying to give it a name, inviting the Holy Spirit to help me identify and really put a specific name on what is that feeling that I'm feeling, and then to just pay attention to it with God and to acknowledge that this is how I feel, and let myself be there with God. And as scary as that can be to admit that we feel that way, it's such a release and a wonderful moment of being able to receive something that God would give us to sort of supply whatever need or whatever lack is there in the middle of that emotional thing. It doesn't make everything better, go away, but it gives us the gift that we need in order to be okay however we are.
I so agree. And as one who, in my early 60s now, I have to admit that up until probably 5 or 6 years ago, I had learned how not to feel those things. I was very outwardly focused on other people's emotions. I was really in touch with everybody else but me. And to learn to identify what was going on internally, it's really been a practice for me.
Yeah.
I have my own spiritual director, and I've met with him for about 3.5 years. And he always asks me, the first thing he asks me whenever we meet is, how do you come?
Mm.
Meaning, what's the condition of your soul today? How are you doing? What's going on inside? And I can't tell you how many months I went through this place of, first of all, not knowing, but also kind of not wanting to admit to him that I was really struggling because I didn't feel like it was okay.
Yeah.
And I have learned that it's okay to be honest about those things. And then every time we have that conversation, he says, "How do I come?" And I kind of go through and like your practice that you just mentioned, what's going on internally. Then he always says to me, "Let's look at God looking at you in love." And it is so comforting to know that no matter how I come, no matter what's going on internally, whether it's fear or hurt or anger or joy, whatever it is, that God looks upon me, God looks upon us in love. And it's okay.
Yeah. For anyone who might be saying, "Gosh, I need to spend some time. I need to take advantage of a few little gaps in my day or schedule or whatever, and really start paying attention and practice being there with God and get some of this maybe built up emotion or whatever is in there, get some of it out." Do you have any suggestions or examples of practices things that people could do that would kind of help them as they begin that process?
Good question.
Mhm.
I I for me, and I'll just say for me because this is what work. I'll just tell you what works for me.
Mhm.
I think sometimes it's hard to get in touch with those emotions.
Mhm.
So one of the things that is often effective is finding music, and it not necessarily upbeat like rah rah praise and worship music, but
Mhm.
music that is soulful that
Mhm.
kind of allows you to feel
Mhm.
music that you can connect with. I think that is a first step that kind of, it's almost like a kickstart
Mhm.
to see what's, to allow yourself to feel. Once those start coming to the surface, maybe to just write them down,
Mhm.
to start with writing them down and acknowledge that that's what is there.
Yeah.
Another step after that would be to journal about it.
Mhm.
I oftentimes write letters to God, and then I allow myself to imagine Him speaking to me. And oftentimes they are. I'm really struggling right now. I'm scared what's going to happen in our world,
Mhm.
and just kind of like I was writing a letter to my best friend.
Yeah.
That's bringing that stuff out.
That's beautiful. And I'm just thinking of how, we can tie it in with what you were saying about lament, where whether it's a 15-minute process or a couple week long process as you revisit these things, to be able to stay in that place of discovering what is there
Hmm.
and to invite God, and then to not skip over really feeling what you're feeling. Like, I feel like that's what complaining is about. It's like, this is how I feel and this is why I feel this way. And to not feel like we got to keep those things, but to write them down, like you're saying, to get them on paper, to give them some credence and some validity, so that we can actually experience the fullness of what we're feeling. What a great way to spend the beginning season of trying to work out some of these things if we're feeling stuck there.
Yeah, and to give ourselves permission to do that. Again, if this kind of goes against the grain,
Yeah.
a little bit of what we've been taught is don't feel those things, or they're uncomfortable, and I'd rather not go there.
Yeah.
And I think to be able to say, okay, I'm going to let myself do that. I have to admit, though, last week I had a day. Actually, I was going to do a Zoom small group and on lament, and one of the exercises that I was preparing for was to write a lament. And I was in a place where I could totally, I was feeling very resistant. I was like, I don't really want to feel that way today. I don't know if I want to bring all that junk up. And that particular day, I forced myself,
Mm.
and I wrote a really, really, I typed it on the computer. I wrote a really long lament. But sometimes we have to push through that too, that resistance, because um, it doesn't always feel really good.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine anyone saying like, I want to feel those things, and yet we learn how much we need to. And so over time, I do feel like the more we practice that and the more we experience the full process that you're describing, the more willing we tend to be to get into it. But like you said, not always. I also wanted to just bring back what you said about the, moving into a point of request. I feel like sometimes I can get to this point where I'm expressing or feeling these things and I'm recognizing, and I forget to ask for what I actually would need. And what a beautiful kind of place to move into if you're not knowing, what do I do with these emotions? Well, the beautiful thing is God is a giver,
Yeah.
So I would think too, that would be a great way for people to kind of take this time and this season that we have and whatever we're feeling, and really put it to God, to say, God, you are the meter of needs, So here's what I need, and to stay there and to wait for the resolution, which you described. What was the word that was the end?
Trust.
Trust. To wait for the trust. That's a gift. That's not something, I don't think we can manufacture that.
I so agree. And part of that, I think that, going through that, the complaint and then into the request, the trust is oftentimes you're remembering the past. You're remembering going, but God, I mean, you'll see this in the Psalms all the time. But God, I know that I remember when you did this for me,
Yeah.
and I know you can do it again.
Yeah.
Or just in a place of worship. But God, I know who you are. You are my protector. You are my healer. You are my helper. And where I am scared, you are my defender. I am not defenseless. Whatever, those are statements of trust. And so what I love about lament, done the biblical, those 3 steps, it is allowing ourselves to feel the emotions and going, yeah, I don't have this figured out. But you are working through a process of prayer that brings you back to faith. And we see that over and over again with David.
Yeah.
We don't just sit there and go, wah, I hate my life, this is terrible. True lament is walking through the process of, I do hate my life and it's terrible. Do something about it, God, and I'll trust you that you're going to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for just for being open to what God was talking to you about, and for being so open to sharing it with the people in your life and with all of us in this way. It seems this is such a timely message, and I know I would encourage anyone who is exploring this path and trying to figure out how to walk it with God to really take some of this to heart, and to invite some of the people into your life to do it with you, so that you're not doing it alone. I know that's such a huge part of my practice as well as yours. So Lisa, yeah, thank you so much. It's nice to see you.
Me too. It's a rare thing these days. So
It is. And when we all get back together, it'll be a great celebration. But for now, we'll keep doing these. So I think I'll say thanks, and we'll sign off now. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Say that again.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. We're coming up on Easter, so we'll celebrate together on Sunday, and then we'll keep marching forward.
All
Thanks,
right.
Lisa.
Great to talk to you, Joel.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.